Hello friends. In this video, we are going to know about Chapter 1 of Class 11 Hornbill book, The Portrait of a Lady, written by eminent writer Khushwant Singh. The video will kickstart with a brief introduction about the author Khushwant Singh. Then I will introduce you to the theme of the story. This will be followed by a story capsule. The video will then delve into the changing relationship between the author and his grandmother. Finally, we will discuss the issue of life of old people as they are driven into loneliness and insecurity of the old age. So, let's go ahead. So, let's know a little bit about the writer. Khushwant Singh was an Indian author, lawyer, diplomat, journalist and politician. Born in Punjab, Khushwant Singh was educated in New Delhi and studied law at St. Stephen's College, Delhi and King's College, London. As a writer, he was best known for his ideas on secularism, humor, sarcasm and an abiding love of poetry. He served as the editor of several literary and news magazines and newspapers. In 2007, he was awarded the Padma Vibhushan, the second highest civilian award in India. The Portrait of a Lady is an affectionate account of the warm relationship that existed between Khushwant Singh and his grandmother spanning over 20 years. The story has the theme of innocence, friendship, love, connection, kindness, selflessness, respect, and acceptance. Narrated in the first person, the story is a memory piece. The theme of innocence is evident from the way the young author describes his grandmother. He finds it hard to imagine that his grandmother may have once been young and pretty. The narrator and his grandmother were thick friends in childhood. The grandmother is always around him, even at school. Being the older friend, she had the patience to wait for her in the temple while the narrator is in school. Just as she feels connected to the narrator, likewise, she has a connection with God. So religion is one more theme here. Religion and prayers have the power to provide her absolute blissfulness. As readers, we get connected to the kind act of grandmother towards the dogs and the birds. An act of kindness is fundamental to her inner peace. The end of the story is also interesting as Singh appears to be exploring the theme of acceptance. The grandmother accepts the dynamism of life and relationships with grace. Once left alone by his growing grandson, she finds peace in other things. Finally, as a reader, we can see that the soul of the story is the changing relationship between the grandmother and the grandson. How the bond changes its form but essentially never fades away. We will discuss this bond in the upcoming slide. Now, let me give you the story capsule. The Portrait of a Lady is a heartwarming pen picture of Khushwant Singh's grandmother who brought him up. The author describes his association with his grandmother and the changes that came about in their relationship with the passage of time. Her simplicity and beauty left an indelible print on the poet's mind. Khushwant Singh's grandmother was short, old and slightly bent and hobbled around the house telling the beads on her rosary. He had seen her look the same for 20 years and to him it seemed that she was really old and could not grow older. it was difficult for him to conceptualize that she could have been young and pretty, to believe that she had had a husband. His grandfather's portrait hung on the wall of the drawing room. He too looked very old and very grandfatherly. Looking at his portrait, one could visualize that he had many grandchildren, but one could not imagine him in his youth with his wife and children. When Khushwant Singh was still young, his parents left for the city, leaving him to the care of his grandmother. They were good friends. She woke him up each morning, bathed him, dressed him, plastered his wooden slate, gave him breakfast, a stale buttered chapati with sugar sprinkled on it, and walked him to school. The school was attached to a temple. While Khushwant Singh and the other children sat in the veranda learning the alphabets and morning prayers, his grandmother sat inside the temple reading scriptures. After they had both finished, they would head back home. On their way, she fed the dogs each day with the stale chapatis that she carried with her. When the writer's parents had settled in the city, they sent for them. This proved to be a turning point in their relationship. The only thing that remained unchanged was their common bedroom. She could not accompany him to school as he went by the school bus. Now he went to an English school where they taught science. She could not understand English and did not believe in science. The fact that they were not taught about God made her unhappy. Khushwant Singh's learning music in school made her unhappier, as she felt it was not meant for gentlefolk. Her communication with him deteriorated further, but it was when he went to the university and got a separate room that even this link was snapped. His grandmother accepted her seclusion with resignation. She rarely left her spinning wheel to talk to anyone. From sunrise to sunset, she would sit by her spinning wheel and recite prayers. Only in the afternoon, she would relax for a while to feed the sparrows. The sparrows would perch on her legs, some on her shoulders, and some even on her head. She would smile but never shoo them away. It used to be the happiest half hour of the day for her. When the writer was going abroad, she went to the railway station to see him off, but did not speak a word, only kissed his forehead. The writer believed this was their last physical contact, as he was going away for 5 years. But she was there when he returned and was delighted to see him back. In the evening, she collected women from the neighborhood and beat the drum and sang for hours of the homecoming of warriors. For the first time, she missed her prayers. She was then taken slightly ill. The doctors reassured the family that there was nothing to worry, but she stopped talking. She said her end was near. She began to tell the beads of her rosary, and her lips moved in a silent prayer before she died. After her death, her body was laid on the floor, covered in a red shawl. Thousands of sparrows came and sat quietly all around her body. The writer's mother threw breadcrumbs, but the sparrows took no notice of them. After her cremation, they flew away without touching the crumbs. In this story, we see the grandmother through the eyes of the narrator. She is an old, wrinkly woman who couldn't have grown older. She is short, plump, and slightly bent. She hobbled about the house in spotless white with her silver locks covering her face. So the narrator describes her as being a winter landscape in the mountains. She has a calm, gentle, and reassuring face. The narrator finds a good friend in her and therefore does not miss his parents when he was with her in the village. The two stick together as buddies. However, in some sense, she was like any other old person who would find difficult to adapt to modern ideologies. She found it hard to accept the teaching of science and music in school. To her, music had lewd associations and not meant for gentlefolk. She was distressed that there was no teaching about God and scriptures. But she was wise enough to not raise her voice against it. She was conservative but not imposing. She found peace in other things. Prayers, spinning wheel and feeding of birds became her recluse. Instead of grumbling about the changing world, she found solace in what we can perhaps call as her hobbies. And for this, she wins the reader's appreciation. She knows how to restrain showing off her emotions. She never lets the narrator know that she has accepted her seclusion with resignation. What is heartwarming is that the difference in lifestyles does not lessen her love for her grandson. Despite her frail age, she goes to see off and also receive her grandson at the railway station. His homecoming makes her forget her prayers, and for once she sings with the neighborhood ladies. Her most endearing quality is her love for animals. In village, she feeds the stray dogs, and in the city, her happiest hour used to be when she would feed the birds. The birds would perch all around her. Her bonding with birds is inexplicable. We see these birds perching in the veranda one last time around her corpse, refusing to eat the breadcrumbs. Let us now discuss the changing relationship of the grandmother and the grandson. The relationship between the grandmother and the author traces the graph of gradual change from a parent role to that of a grandmother. As the custodian of her grandchild, she was a constant companion of her grandson. The first turning point in their friendship came as they moved to the city. Moving to the city and the change in the educational curriculum with the author's admission into an English medium school led to her first orientation to her changed circumstances. The grandmother realized that her affection could no longer be a wholly possessive one. She realized that her role as an educator had ceased altogether. As the years rolled by, they saw less of each other. The common link of friendship was finally snapped when the author got his separate room. She now adopted the role of a lovable elder, overseeing her grandson's progress and basking in it. She accepted her seclusion, with resignation though. She came to see him off when the narrator was going abroad for further studies. She was overjoyed to receive him back, and therefore showed her elation by singing songs with neighborhood ladies. This did lead to dire circumstances. The story provokes a thought in we readers. It is about the life of old people. The story compels the reader to marvel at the beautiful relationship of the grandmother and the narrator at one end, and worry over the growing plight of the older generation at the other end. Love between generations is becoming a thing of the past. It is important for the younger generation to learn the art of balancing the future and the past. In the journey of life, the elders should not be left behind. With this, I would like to end this presentation. Hope you liked it. Bye-bye.